The roguelike deck builder is a subgenre of, well, the roguelike genre. It's one that I haven't spent too much time exploring myself, but has been explored by developers and fans alike quite a bit. It takes the concept of deck building games, seen initially in the realm of tabletop, and fuses it with roguelike elements, creating an experience that truly stands on its own from other subgenres in the space. The basis for almost all deck building roguelikes has you travel from space to space, area to area, defeating enemies with your deck of cards, which act as your actions that you'll be crafting from cards you'll randomly see and encounter along your way. You'll see random events, get random pieces of equipment and shops, and depending on the game, interact with other mechanics. This is a very simplified and blanket explanation of the subgenre, as it will of course differ somewhat from game to game. When looking at where it all started, the first game to truly merge these genres and create the first deck building roguelike was called Dream Quest, which was created for mobile devices in 2014 by Peter Waller, and it looks like Garbo. And that may be enough to initially turn people away, but when looking deeper into it and taking a look at the game's reception, it was a well-designed game. Designed so well, in fact, that it founded the basis for what a roguelike deck builder would look like, and its influence is still felt in the subgenre today. With that though, the subgenre didn't really take off until the Mac Daddy of roguelike deck builders entered early access in 2017. Slay the Spire. This game not only popularized the subgenre, but became the face of it. Ask anyone to name a deck building roguelike, and they will most likely think of Slay the Spire, and it's honestly for a good reason. Not only is it designed well with a great and loving community that supports it with mods after its full release, but it's so readily available on pretty much every platform. For God's sake, there's even a tabletop version. There have been plenty of games entering into subgenre space since then. Iris and the Giant, Nowhere Prophets, One Step from Eden, Monster Train, and many more, all of which add some sort of new take or addition to the genre, making them feel similar yet unique. And although there are many games held in very high regard, no game seems to be able to top the popularity of Slay the Spire. Many hold the game as the peak of the subgenre, a staple game for not only the subgenre itself, but the roguelike genre as a whole. But I'm not the biggest fan personally. Now before you raise your pitchforks and torches, alright, good, okay. I recognize that the game is great for a multitude of reasons, but for some reason it didn't hook me. It's something that I mentioned before in one of my other videos, and I honestly thought it was because I didn't like the deck building roguelike subgenre as a whole, as most roguelikes that I play are more action oriented. I made this assumption without actually playing other games in the space, and there are some really good ones as well that honestly deserve more attention, but there was one game in particular that stood above the rest for me, and made me realize that it wasn't the genre that prohibited me from liking Slay the Spire. That game is Chord, another deck building roguelike developed by Blue Bubble that was released on January 26th of this year. I had played its Steam Next Fest demo and participated in a few of the game's playtests, all the way up until its release, where I purchased it and have since become obsessed. Chord has its issues on both the gameplay and technical side, but for some reason I'm addicted to this game, and there have been times when all I felt like playing was Chord. It's easily become one of my favorite roguelike games, up there with Have a Nice Death and Deflector, and if you watch my videos you already know how much I love those games. But again, why is it that I loved Chord, but didn't really enjoy Slay the Spire? It's something I wanted to delve into in a video to not only talk about Chord, but also take time to analyze it and its inspiration a little closer, and maybe figure out the answer to that question of mine. Let's start by taking a look at Chord. Chord has you take control of a party or band of 4 musicians, a singer, a guitarist, bassist, and drummer, as you travel through a map full of enemy encounters, random events, shops, and a boss fight waiting for you at the end of each act, for a total of 3 acts. The story is fairly straightforward. Demons were rampaging about and were eventually sealed away by a guitar called the Chronocaster. Peace fell upon the city until years later, as the demons have broken through again, and it's up to you and the band to make it to the portal and help seal it back up. That's a relatively general explanation without spoiling anything for first time players. I also want to say that I love the narrator. He does a fantastic job here. When it comes to gameplay, it's like most other games in the subgenre. You'll be building up a deck of cards with the random pool that you'll encounter along your journey, as well as relics to aid you along the way as well. Although, one of the unique things about this game starts right at the beginning with the game's party mechanic, which the gameplay is built upon. Your band, as mentioned before, consists of 4 members, each of which has its own starting cards, relic, and overall playstyle. Singers are more supportive oriented, granting buffs, drawing power, and even healing. Guitarists are more aggression and damage focused. Bassists are more supportive with more debuffs, but can act as secondary damage dealers. And drummers are more tank oriented, with more block granting and damage soaking cards. These act as general categories for the characters that you can choose, but sometimes depending on the deck you're crafting and the characters in your band, some character roles could change. The same goes for how you play, as characters have decently different playstyles from one another. For example, Roxy, Hyde, and Boar are all drummers, filling that tank role for your party, but they go about it in different ways. Hyde will taunt enemies to take their attention off your allies, and build up stacks of defiance off of taking hits to charge a stun for his next attack and negate self-damage. Roxy is more oriented on building the party's defenses in the way of armor, and can use the stone charges she builds up from creating armor to be used as damage or grant more armor with certain cards. Boar differs from these two by utilizing barriers to mitigate damage from attacks as a whole, but focuses on dealing damage to gain more barrier charges. These three characters fill that tank role, but go about it in different ways, and depending on the cards and relics you wind up getting, they may begin to fill another role as well, such as a debuff generator or damage amplifier, or even a secondary damage dealer. And this goes for the rest of the cast as well. I really like the party system of Power Chord, as their unique styles, cards, and etc. allow for a lot of mixing and matching for more variance in play, to add more replayability as a whole. It also has a direct impact on character death as well, for if a character dies in combat, you now lose access to the cards associated with their slot in the band. So if your guitarist dies and they were your only real source of damage, say goodbye to your damage cards and hello to grief. This remains until that party member is resurrected at a healing site, defeating the boss of that specific act or from a random event. I love this, as although it hurts to lose a party member, it makes you consider every action you take that much more, as losing a party member can be a massive swing of events and put you at a major deficit. This is the core of Power Chord, and what gives its gameplay identity. When it comes to everything else surrounding the gameplay, its rock theming, music, visuals, character, and enemy designs are all stellar in my opinion, and had originally drawn me to the game in the first place. I again have some issues with it, mostly in some of the UI and quality of life, such as not being able to view the game map or your deck of cards at certain moments that feel like I should be able to, as well as some of the balancing and bugs that are slowly being addressed by the developers. Now, when it comes to Slay the Spire, it's relatively most of the same, except for the fact that the game has you control only one character with their own specific deck of cards that you can mix and match with cards from other classes, but this is done fairly infrequently. Luckily though, each character has a large selection of cards and their own very unique playstyles. Each character, the Ironclad, the Silent, the Defect, and the Watcher, is designed beautifully, allowing you to play a single character in multiple ways, with different builds that can vary greatly when you throw in the game's relics into the mix. This, on top of the game's ascension levels and weekly challenges, modding scene, custom runs, and overall bustling community, provides almost anyone who's looking to get into the game hundreds upon hundreds of hours of content to be a part of. The visuals, although fairly simple, alongside the music of the game are really good, but personally not something I'd write home about, specifically the music, as I would tend to mute it and just play my own. But overall, when compared to Power Chord, Slay the Spire seems almost leagues ahead, but I will say that Slay the Spire has been out much longer than Power Chord and has plenty of time to release content, bug fixes, adjustments, so I won't be paying too much time to these things when trying to figure out why I enjoy one over the other. Now, when looking at both of these games, the basis for a roguelike deck builder that we had outlined earlier in this video lines up beautifully with them. But, of course, there are many differences once you begin to take a closer look at the mechanics in play. So let's start with the biggest mechanic at play, and that's the party system. Power Chord's 4-party system to Slay the Spire's one-man mission is something that I immediately began to look into when trying to consider why my enjoyment of these games differed. That and how some of the battle mechanics worked, but we'll touch on that in a few. Both games have a good bit of variety when it comes to builds and build variety, but I think the biggest thing isn't just the variety in character playstyle in Power Chord that pulls me in, but the starting cards and starting deck of the game. In Slay the Spire, each character starts with strikes, blocks, and then a few unique cards, enough to get you going and get your deck underway, but most of the time in your late game deck, those strike and block cards are useless and will more than likely be thrown out at any chance you get. Having these weaker and at some points throwaway clutter cards does provide you with the feeling of getting stronger as you progress, and your deck becomes more fleshed out with better cards, which is an important feeling to have for deck builders. Power Chord, on the other hand, has each band member start with 2 to 3 cards that are each fully unique to them and directly interact with their starting relic. If I get bored of playing Ember, I can swap to Cleo not only to have a different playstyle, but entirely different starting cards, and depending on how you wish to play them, some of these starting cards will more than likely stick with you through your run. You'll be exhausting and removing cards that you don't want to have in Power Chord, just like most deck builders, but your starting cards hold a bit more power than that of Slay the Spire. Both of these games essentially just go about treating their starting cards in different ways. Slay the Spire treats your starting cards as a stepping stone to crafting up a new deck, while Power Chord treats your starting cards as the basis for building your deck. In both of these games, your deck can switch up quite a bit from what you started with, but in Power Chord, more often than not, your starting cards will remain with you through your run, giving more purpose to the cards you start with. Slay the Spire's starting deck works, and it's designed well for what the cards are intended to do, but I just prefer Power Chord's approach of having those starting cards be more impactful. Now, let's break down some of the combat mechanics. In combat, things play out relatively the same across both games. You take your turn playing cards you draw, each with different energy costs that will be cast from your limited pool of energy, reacting to how enemies intend to act on their turn. After your turn is complete, the enemy will then take their turn, and so on and so forth. Aside from the sort of obvious differences in balancing these games have, due to the difference in the number of party members, the biggest thing I like about combat in Power Chord is how armor works. Both allies and enemies have armor that soaks up damage to protect their precious life bar, and can be increased in combats and depleted fully, but each party member has a base amount they will always start with in each combat encounter. What I love about the armor system is how it interacts with the decision making of the player, as depleting all of an enemy's armor will cause them to stop whatever action they plan on taking that turn, giving you the ability to deny big damage, a fatal hit, debuff placement, and just whatever the enemy had planned on doing that day. This has you decide on who to focus on in a fight, as well as when you should break the armor of an enemy, as once you break it, you no longer interrupt their action unless you kill them or stun them, though if they somehow regain armor, you will be able to interrupt them once more. Armor is also retained through each turn, making stacking armor early in combat an actual viable thing to do to prepare for a bigger attack down the road. In Slay the Spire, armor is treated much differently, as HP bars are bigger and armor is more of a supplementary thing. Unless you have Barricade, an Ironclad specific card, your armor will disappear between rounds as you'll be focusing on mitigating damage as it comes. There's also no real way of interrupting the actions of most enemies, aside from just killing them. This isn't a bad thing, as it's just how the game is designed. But Power Chord's approach of placing more urgency and control onto the player in combats is something I enjoy greatly. The dynamic decision making of enemy targeting, attacking versus blocking, and approaches to combat as a whole are something I enjoy more in Power Chord than in Slay the Spire, as the approach of Slay the Spire places more power and control into the enemy, while Power Chord gives more power and control to the player. But there are things I do enjoy in Slay the Spire more than Power Chord, and that comes in the form of quality of life, progression, and run variety. Slay the Spire has many things that I wish Power Chord has on the quality of life side of things, such as the ability to view the map pretty much whenever, and an actual compendium to see the different cards and relics that are in the game. Power Chord limits your visibility of the map in most scenarios, which although isn't bad, it's quite frustrating when you want to take a look at your placement on the map and plan ahead. You can't even view the map in combat. I can look past that. But what I can't look past is the fact that Power Chord doesn't have a proper compendium. You can only view the unlockable cards and relics, and not everything as a whole. There are several cards and relics that are just missing from the list, which definitely shouldn't be the case. I get that this is technically the tab to view the challenges, so you can see what you need to do to unlock specific things, but just completely omitting cards that are already unlocked from the start is just a decision I don't understand. Especially in a roguelike. We've done this before with Deflector. Being able to view the unlockables is important, not only to give the player a sense of progression, but to also allow players a place to look at and understand all the things that are available to them and see all the things that are possible to come up during a run. Deflector figured out that having that feature be locked behind an optional quest was a bad idea, learned from the mistake, and made that something available to the player from the start. Power Chord at least has this feature available from the start, but you're missing part of it. I'm hard on these games because I love them so much, goddammit. Now, I mentioned the challenges tab from before, and this is essentially how unlocking things will work, by completing specific challenges and goals. I like this idea to a certain degree. This allows for a more creative approach to get people to attempt new things, try new builds, and etc. But at a certain point, some of these are just tedious. For example, Ember has been in the game since day 1 and requires you to kill 10 Furnace Demons to unlock her, which only appear in Acts 2 and 3, though they have a completely random chance of appearing, meaning if your RNG is completely unlucky, you in theory could never encounter enough demons to defeat. My RNG luck is horrid, so although she was there in the game from the start, she was the last character for me to unlock, even after unlocking the 3 other characters in the base game and 2 others added to the game after release. A single run had me finding about 1 or 2 if I was lucky, but it doesn't end there. There are specific things that are just out of your hands, as you're praying for RNG to be in your favor just so you can unlock something new. There are plenty of challenges that you'll just unlock over your time of playing, and I guess the RNG challenges are technically slotting into that as well. I just prefer the sort of leveling progression seen in Slay the Spire and some other roguelikes like Deflector. It's straightforward, effective, and places control into the player to actively want to do better and progress further for more XP to unlock more things. But I absolutely understand the approach and benefits of having things locked behind specific challenges. The last thing I think Slay the Spire does better than Power Chord is run variety. I think both games have a lot of variety when it comes to runs. In my opinion, Power Chord has the leg up with enemy variety, but Slay the Spire has the edge in boss variety. Slay the Spire in each act has 3 unique bosses that you could end up facing, something that Power Chord doesn't have. Power Chord instead has 3 bosses, 1 for each act, and although I like how the majority of them are designed, the variety in bosses in Slay the Spire is a really nice touch to provide that extra variety in runs. The changing of bosses in Slay the Spire also plays into how you craft your deck, as you'll look for cards that will help with specific bosses. For example, when fighting the Slime or Hexaghost in Act 1, if you're the Ironclad, Fire Breather will work wonders into dealing extra damage as you draw into status cards, and AoE cards will work wonders for the Slime as it splits down. In Power Chord, you have the freedom to mostly build how you choose without much boss influence, but when crafting your deck, you will need to consider how you'll deal damage and how you'll block damage, just like Slay the Spire. For this video, I spent a couple of hours with Slay the Spire, and I will say that I did have fun during the time I spent with it, but after playing Power Chord, I think I found my current favorite and preferred deck builder. I also went and spent some time playing other deck builders to get a deeper look into the subgenre as a whole, and I'm just gonna mention a few of the ones that I enjoyed and think deserve some attention from those looking to get into the subgenre or are fans of it already. First up, there's Nowhere Prophet, an unforgiving deck builder that has your cards represent your followers with the sort of positioned grid-based combat basis. Cards that are destroyed in combat become wounded, and if they're wounded twice, that follower will die and you'll lose access to that card. Events on the map can also cause you to lose followers, to being given away, enslaved, or even die. Having to manage your food, loyalty, and followers on top of its unique gameplay and difficulty honestly provides a fairly engaging experience for players looking for a challenge. Arisen the Giant is a beautifully stylized deck-building roguelike that also places importance on the enemy position, as clearing a part of the row moves everything in said row forward. Cards are also one-time use, making you consider how to go about clearing out the enemy, with which cards, and when they should be used. It's a genuinely nice experience with a nice art style, a good soundtrack, and difficult, rewarding gameplay that challenges you to master the mechanics of the game. One Step from Eden takes the gameplay style of the Mega Man Network series and throws in roguelike elements to craft a really fast-paced and honestly exhilarating gameplay loop. Its gameplay difficulty revolves heavily around your ability to maneuver around the battlefield, dodging attacks and landing your own. With solid visuals and a banging soundtrack, this roguelike definitely deserves the attention of those who are a fan of the Mega Man Network games or are looking for a big shakeup to the deck-building roguelike subgenre. Beneath Oresa is a newer deck builder that's currently in early access, but I've been enjoying my time with it. Unfortunately, I haven't spent too much time with it just yet, but I can say it's worth looking into. It takes the standard roguelike deck building formula and innovates with its unique companion system, combat system that utilizes near and far properties, and solid visuals. And if this game nails anything, it's definitely visual aesthetic, theming, and visual feedback, as combat is animated fluidly in the 3D space with a beautiful cel-shaded style. Playing cards feels like I'm crafting a combo of moves as I dash and strike enemies across the battlefield, which is something I haven't seen in a roguelike deck builder yet. Now, please don't walk away from this video thinking that I hate Slay the Spire, because I don't. It's an amazing game that acts as an inspiration for many games entering into the subgenre. At the end of the day, I like Slay the Spire, but I love Power Chord. With the devs' approach to giving weekly balances and bug fixes, I believe that they can continue to make Power Chord even better and craft an overall fantastic game. I'll be putting the Steam page of every game I mention in this video in the description, so if any of them interest you, you can slide on down there and check them out for yourself. And as usual, my name is CrossVee. I hope to see you all next time. Love y'all. Peace.